Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support in helping our channel grow. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers, so please support us by subscribing and helping us reach this milestone. Now let's start the story. The crystal chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom cast a warm glow over the pre-wedding celebration, their light reflecting off the delicate silver threads woven into Dr. Nolan Gibson's impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit. At 52, he was a commanding presence, tall, distinguished, with steel gray hair and the confident demeanor of a man accustomed to holding lives in his hands. As Mount C's leading cardiothoracic surgeon, he had saved countless patients, but tonight was about a different kind of achievement, his daughter Brianna's wedding. Nolan surveyed the opulent setting with quiet satisfaction. The lavish floral arrangements, white orchids and blush roses, harmonized beautifully with the venue's Beaux-Arts architecture. Every detail of the million-dollar wedding had been meticulously planned, a testament to years of careful preparation and financial commitment. The guest list read like a who's who of New York's medical elite, with hospital board members mingling among society's most prominent figures. Dr. Gibson, a waiter murmured, appearing at his elbow with a tray of crystal flutes. "Thank you," Nolan replied, accepting a glass and taking a measured sip as he observed his wife, Laurel, effortlessly working the room. At 48, she still turned heads in a burgundy Vera Wang gown, her blonde hair cascading in elegant waves. She laughed at something Alexander Chun, the hospital's chief of surgery, had said, lightly touching his arm with practiced charm. Their younger children, Julia and Ray, had inherited her social grace. Julia, 23 and in her first year of medical school, animatedly discussed her latest rotation with a group of young doctors, while Ray, home from his freshman year at Yale, had effortlessly attracted a small crowd of admiring young women, despite his sister being the evening's true center of attention. "Daddy," Brianna's voice cut through Nolan's thoughts. She approached, radiant in a white Oscar de la Renta cocktail dress, her engagement ring catching the light. "The string quartet is about to take their break. Should we have the DJ start setting up?" Nolan checked his Patek Philippe watch, a gift from a grateful patient whose heart he had rebuilt after a catastrophic accident. "Perfect timing, princess. I'll have Thomas coordinate." Brianna beamed, reaching up to straighten his tie. "You've thought of everything. I still can't believe tomorrow is finally happening." Brandon's parents are thrilled with all the arrangements. "Speaking of Brandon, where's my future son-in-law?" Nolan asked, trapped in conversation with Uncle Enrique's wife about medical malpractice insurance. She said with an exaggerated eye roll. The mention of Enrique made Nolan glance toward the ballroom's entrance. His best friend of 25 years was uncharacteristically late, not entirely surprising. Enrique had always had a flair for dramatic entrances, a trait that sometimes frustrated their more conservative colleagues, but had never bothered Nolan. After all, certain eccentricities had to be forgiven in a man who had stood by you through everything, celebrating career milestones, offering unwavering support through difficult times, and even helping you recover after surgery. As if summoned by the thought, Enrique swept into the ballroom. At 54, he carried his years with Mediterranean flamboyance, his dark hair artfully styled to conceal the gray. His custom Italian suit emphasized his trim physique. Catching Nolan's eye across the room, he raised a hand in greeting. "There's my favorite cardiac cowboy." Enrique's voice carried easily, drawing amused smiles from nearby guests who were well accustomed to his theatrical nature. He embraced Nolan warmly, clapping him on the back. "Sorry I'm late. Had a complicated consultation that ran over." "You're just in time for Brandon's father's toast," Nolan replied, though he couldn't ignore the peculiar tension in his friend's smile. As Laurel approached to greet him, Enrique's expression shifted back into its usual charm. "Enrique, darling," she murmured, brushing air kisses against his cheeks. The lingering scent of Clive Christian No. 1, Nolan's Christmas gift to her, filled the air. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten us." "Forget my best friend's daughter's pre-wedding celebration?" "Never," Enrique assured her. Yet as he stepped back, his hand lingered just a moment too long on Laurel's waist. "I did have to reschedule 2 procedures for tomorrow morning, though," he added. "I'll be arriving at the cathedral a bit later than planned." Something about their exchange struck a discordant note in Nolan's mind, but before he could dwell on it, the sharp chime of a crystal knife against a champagne flute called for attention. If I could have everyone's attention. William Preston III, managing partner at one of Manhattan's top law firms, stood on the small stage where the string quartet had been playing. "I'd like to propose a toast to our children and the incredible family we are about to join." Nolan moved to stand beside his daughter, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder as William continued. "When Brandon first told us about Brianna, Caroline and I immediately knew she was special. a brilliant young woman following in her father's footsteps at Mount Si, with a heart as gifted as her surgical skills. But meeting Nolan and Laurel Gibson truly showed us where she gets her exceptional qualities. The speech struck all the right notes, honoring family, tradition, and the bright future ahead. Nolan smiled at the appropriate moments, but his focus wavered as he caught a fleeting exchange between Laurel and Enrique. A look, barely perceptible, passed between them when William mentioned family values. Enrique's hand twitched slightly toward Laurel before he caught himself. And so, William concluded, to Brandon and Brianna, and to the joining of our families. May tomorrow be the start of a lifetime of joy and truth. To Brandon and Brianna, the crowd echoed, raising their glasses in unison. As the celebration resumed, Nolan quietly excused himself to handle last-minute details for the ceremony. The plaza's wedding coordinator had sent a message requesting final confirmation of the morning's delivery schedule. The curved hallway leading to the business center was quieter, the sounds of the party fading with each step. Nolan had just finished reviewing the schedule when voices from a nearby alcove caught his attention. Years of performing intricate surgeries had trained his ears to pick up even the most subtle sounds, a vital skill when listening for even the slightest irregularity in a heartbeat. The old fool outdid himself with this wedding. Laurel's voice was low but unmistakably clear. $1 million for his princess. Nolan froze mid-step, his hand resting against the polished wooden paneling of the hallway. He always did have expensive taste. Enrique's distinctive accent carried a note of amusement. Remember when we convinced him the vasectomy worked? That was your masterstroke, mi amor. A soft laugh from Laurel. All three are yours. And now he's paid for this $1 million wedding too. The world tilted slightly on its axis, but Nolan's surgeon's steadiness kept him perfectly still, his breath controlled and silent. Dad's such a fool. Brianna's voice now held none of the warmth she had shown minutes earlier. At least biological dad will be walking me down the aisle tomorrow too. Keep your voice down, Carita, Enrique chided, though his tone was more amused than concerned. Not that it matters. He'd never hear us over that dreadful string quartet, he insisted on. I still can't believe he never questioned why none of the kids look like him, Julia added, her voice laced with disdain. I mean, we all have Enrique's eyes. He sees what he wants to see, Laurel replied smoothly. It's what makes him such a brilliant surgeon, and such a terrible judge of character. He's so focused on the heart, he misses everything else. The monthly deposits are set for the kids? Enrique's voice shifted to business-like efficiency. Same as always, Laurel confirmed. Disguised as your academic mentoring payments. He never even glances at those transactions. Brandon's family bought the whole mentor story too, Brianna added with a smirk. They think it's so wonderful that Dad's best friend took such an interest in our education. The conversation drifted toward the final wedding arrangements, but Nolan had heard enough. He moved silently back toward the business center, his mind already sorting and analyzing the information with the same precision he applied in surgery. 20 minutes later, he sat in the private office of the business center, his laptop open to his banking dashboard. The room's modern minimalism, clean lines, and subtle lighting mirrored his current state of mind. His hands, steady as ever, moved across the keyboard as he accessed years of financial records. There they were, regular transfers from Enrique Knapp to his children's accounts, dating back to their births. Quarterly payments labeled Academic Mentoring Program, Mount Si Initiative. The amounts increased as each child aged, with substantial spikes during their college years. His first call was to James Chun, his lawyer, and Alexander's brother. James, I need you to execute Protocol Lazarus. Immediately. Yes, the full package we discussed last year. No, this isn't a drill. The second call went to Serena Winters, a private investigator he had retained after noticing discrepancies in his children's medical histories. At the time, he had dismissed it as professional paranoia. Ms. Winters, the surveillance package we discussed. I need everything you have on Enrique Knapp and my wife. Going back 25 years. Priority status. The final call was to his banker in Dublin, where he had established citizenship 3 years earlier after treating Ireland's Minister of Health, a precaution that had once seemed excessive. Mr. O'Connor, initiate the transfer sequence we prepared. Full spectrum. Effective immediately. By midnight, the full scope of the betrayal lay documented in folders on his laptop. Enrique, as head of Mount Si's vasectomy clinic, had falsified Nolan's procedure records. DNA test results, ordered discreetly under the guise of routine medical screening, confirmed Enrique's paternity of all 3 children. Bank statements revealed a meticulously concealed network of payments and accounts linking Nolan's family to the man he had once called his best friend. The plaza's business center had long since emptied. In the distance, The last guests were departing the pre-wedding celebration. Nolan's phone buzzed with a message from Laurel. Coming up soon? Everyone's asking where you disappeared to. He closed his laptop, sliding it into its leather case with deliberate care. In the morning, he would demonstrate exactly what 25 years of precision surgery had taught him about excising diseased tissue from an otherwise healthy system. Tomorrow's ceremony would indeed mark a new beginning, just not the one they were expecting. He texted back, had to handle some last-minute details. Everything is prepared for tomorrow. It wasn't a lie. Dr. Nolan Gibson had never been more prepared in his life. When he returned to their hotel suite, Laurel was already in bed, scrolling through photos from the evening on her phone. She looked up as he entered, her smile practiced and perfect. There you are, darling. I was starting to worry. Just ensuring tomorrow goes smoothly, he replied, his voice pleasant and controlled. Everything's taken care of. You've always been so detail-oriented, she murmured, reaching for him as he passed the bed. It's one of the things I love about you. Nolan moved just slightly out of reach, maintaining his smile. Big day tomorrow. Better get some rest. In the bathroom, he took longer than usual with his evening routine, studying his reflection in the mirror. The face that looked back at him remained unchanged. Distinguished features, clear gray eyes, the same steady gaze that had guided him through countless surgeries. Yet beneath that familiar facade, something fundamental had shifted. He thought about that moment in surgery when the true source of the problem was revealed. A blocked artery, a failing valve, a tumor concealed beneath healthy tissue. That moment of clarity when you knew exactly what needed to be done. This was such a moment. By the time he slipped into bed, Laurel was already asleep, her breathing deep and even. In just a few hours, she would awaken to face the true cost of her decades of deception. For now, Dr. Nolan Gibson closed his eyes, his mind already moving through tomorrow's procedures with surgical precision. The night passed quietly, the plaza's thick walls muffling the ceaseless rhythm of the city below. In their separate rooms down the hall, his children, Enrique's children, slept peacefully, dreaming of tomorrow's celebration. None of them aware that the greatest performance of their lives had just reached its final act. In the darkness, Nolan allowed himself a small smile. Tomorrow would indeed be memorable, just not in the way they had planned. Dawn broke over Manhattan, casting St. Patrick's Cathedral in soft hues of rose and gold. At precisely 6:45 a.m., the first of the wedding staff arrived to find elegant notices affixed to the heavy wooden doors. Maria Santos, the cathedral's head coordinator, scanned the printed card stock, reading the message twice to be sure. The wedding of Brianna Gibson and Brandon Preston has been canceled. Our sincerest apologies for the inconvenience. This must be a mistake, Maria murmured, reaching for her phone to call Dr. Gibson. The call went straight to voicemail. By 7 a.m., guests began arriving in their finest attire, only to be met by ushers distributing small ivory gift boxes, wedding favors intended for the reception. Inside each box, nestled beneath traditional Jordan almonds, lay a USB drive and a carefully printed letter. William Preston III, still adjusting his bow tie as he ascended the cathedral steps, was among the first to open his. As his eyes scanned the letter, his face paled, fingers tightening around the expensive stationery. My God, he whispered, turning to show the contents to his wife, Caroline. The USB drive contained meticulously organized folders, DNA test results, bank statements, medical records, and surveillance photos spanning 2 decades. Inside the Preston Town car, Brandon scrolled through the documents on his laptop, his expression hardening. They knew, he said quietly. Brianna and her entire family knew they were deceiving us. Look at these messages. She's been calling Enrique Dad in private for years. On the cathedral steps, guests stood frozen in shock. Conversations turned to hushed murmurs as the truth unraveled in real time. Hospital board members huddled in tight clusters, their expressions grim as they reviewed evidence of Enrique's medical misconduct. Society matrons, who had long envied Laurel's perfect life, whispered behind manicured hands, their schadenfreude barely concealed. At 7:30 a.m., a sleek black Mercedes screeched to a halt outside the cathedral. Laurel Gibson emerged, still in her silk robe and slippers, her carefully curated composure in tatters. Enrique followed close behind, his usual effortless charm replaced by barely controlled panic. Where's he? Laurel demanded, grabbing Maria's arm. Where's Nolan? Maria's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing a flicker of distaste. Dr. Gibson is in the sacristy, Mrs. Gibson, she said coolly. He's been here since 6. They found Nolan in the serene quiet of the sacristy, impeccably dressed in his morning suit. He stood at a small desk, organizing papers with the same careful precision he used in surgery. What have you done? Laurel's voice trembled with fury. Do you have any idea how many people you've humiliated? Nolan looked up, his expression calm. Interesting choice of words, Laurel. Not how could you? Or why did you do this? Just concern over humiliation. Always so fixated on appearances, aren't you? This is madness, Enrique interjected, stepping forward in an attempt to reclaim control. Think about what you're doing to your children. Nolan let out a quiet, humorless laugh. My children? His voice was measured, deliberate. Let's be precise, Enrique. Precision matters in our profession, doesn't it? They're your children. The DNA results in those wedding favors make that abundantly clear. He picked up a thick envelope from the desk and extended it toward Laurel. Your divorce papers, he said. My lawyer will be here shortly to witness your signature. Though I imagine you'll want to read the terms first. Laurel snatched the envelope, her hands trembling as she scanned the contents. Her face drained of color. This is impossible, she whispered. You can't have transferred everything. The houses, the accounts. The beauty of Irish citizenship, Nolan interrupted smoothly. Quite useful for protecting assets. I learned that after noticing certain irregularities in the children's medical histories. Genetic markers that didn't quite match up. Small details that most would overlook. But then, attention to detail is crucial in cardiac surgery, isn't it? Enrique's mask of confidence cracked. The board will never believe. They already have everything, Nolan cut in. Including records of your creative approach to vasectomy procedures. Tell me, Enrique, how many other men paid you to fake their surgeries? The insurance fraud alone should keep the authorities interested for quite some time. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the sacristy's ornate windows, they could see Brianna arriving, still clad in her wedding dress. Julia and Ryan followed close behind, their phones inundated with messages from guests, pulling them from their preparation suites at the plaza in various states of dress. Daddy! Brianna burst into the room, her wedding gown billowing behind her. What are you doing? You can't. I believe you made it quite clear last night that I'm not your daddy, Nolan replied evenly. Though I must admit, the performance over the years was impressive. Those Father's Day cards, the tearful talks about wanting to follow in my footsteps in medical school. You really should have considered acting instead of medicine, Brianna. You scumsucker, Julia spat, her face twisted in fury. We'll tell everyone how controlling you were. How you? By all means, Nolan gestured to his phone on the desk. Social media is a powerful tool. Though you might want to check your trust fund accounts first. As of midnight, they've been converted into educational trusts, with rather strict morality clauses. Clauses that take a very dim view of long-term deception. Ryan, the youngest, had remained silent until now. You can't prove anything, he muttered. It's our word against yours. Against 2 decades of evidence? Nolan raised an eyebrow. Bank records showing Enrique's payments since your births. DNA tests. Surveillance photos. The hospital board is particularly interested in the medical fraud. As if on cue, the sacristy door opened once more, admitting James Chun alongside a severe-looking woman in a designer suit. Dr. Gibson, the woman greeted him with a curt nod. I'm Patricia Knapp, Mount C's legal counsel. She turned to Enrique, her expression frigid. And soon to be your ex-wife. Enrique's face drained of color. Patricia, I can explain. Save it for the board hearing, she cut him off. And your malpractice insurers, though I doubt they covered deliberate fraud. Now then, James Chun stepped forward, divorce papers in hand. Mrs. Gibson, shall we discuss the terms? I suggest you sign quickly. The press will be here soon, and I imagine you'd prefer to be gone by then. Laurel's gaze darted frantically around the room, searching for support. She found none. Brianna had collapsed onto a wooden chair, her flawless makeup streaked with tears. Julia stared in horror at her phone, watching her trust fund balance vanish in real time. Ryan simply looked lost. You've destroyed everything, Laurel whispered, her hand trembling as she accepted the pen from James. No, Laurel, Nolan corrected gently. You destroyed everything. I'm simply ensuring the consequences land where they belong. As Laurel signed, Enrique made a last-ditch attempt. The hospital won't risk the scandal. My reputation. Patricia cut him off. The board is already in an emergency session. Dr. Gibson's resignation letter included detailed evidence of your creative medical practices. Several patients have already come forward. Outside, the murmuring crowd had swelled, the clicks of press cameras punctuating the air. The story was spreading through Manhattan's medical elite like wildfire. What about Brandon? Brianna's voice was small, barely above a whisper. I need to talk to him, to explain. Nolan regarded her coolly. Brandon and his family left 20 minutes ago. Apparently, they don't take kindly to being deceived about paternity. William mentioned something about being grateful the prenuptial agreement hadn't been signed yet. The weight of reality seemed to crash down on Enrique then. His tan complexion had turned ashen, his usual swagger replaced by anxious fidgeting. The malpractice suits will ruin me. Laurel, we. Laurel let out a brittle laugh. There is no we, Enrique. You promised you covered your tracks. You assured me the vasectomy records were perfect. Fascinating, Nolan mused, watching their alliance disintegrate. 25 years of deception, undone in 25 minutes of pressure. Though I suppose that's often how it goes in surgery, too. One small weakness, and everything collapses. James Chun cleared his throat. Dr. Gibson, the papers are signed. Shall I file them immediately? Please do. Nolan straightened his tie, glancing at his reflection in the window. I believe my work here is done. You can't just leave. Julia protested. What about our tuition? Our lives? You owe us. Nolan met her gaze, his expression unwavering. I owed my children everything. I owe Enrique's children nothing. The educational trusts remain active, if you choose to earn them honestly. Consider it a lesson in consequences. He picked up his briefcase and paused at the door. Oh, and Enrique. He added, almost as an afterthought, the board might take an interest in those other vasectomy cases you handled. The ones for the Wall Street executives. I imagine their wives would be very interested in learning about your special services. The sacristy fell into stunned silence as Nolan walked away, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Through the stained glass windows, they watched him emerge into the morning sunlight. Photographers surged toward him, but he passed through them with the same composed authority he carried in the operating room. The black Mercedes that had brought Laurel and Enrique now awaited him instead, his new driver holding the door open as he settled into the leather seat. His phone buzzed, a message from the chief of surgery at St. James's Hospital in Dublin. Position ready when you are, Nolan. Ireland would be lucky to have you. A faint smile crossed his lips as he gazed out the tinted windows, watching his former family's world crumble. The cathedral spires rose against the morning sky, silent witnesses to a ceremony of truth rather than deception. As the car pulled away, chaos unraveled behind him. Enrique, now at the mercy of his wife's wrath and the board's investigation. Laurel, watching her carefully crafted social empire collapse like a house of cards. And their children, forced to confront the cost of their complicity as their privileged existence disintegrated. But Dr. Nolan Gibson felt only the deep, steady satisfaction of a surgeon after a successful procedure, when diseased tissue had been carefully excised, making way for new, healthy growth. His phone buzzed again. This time, a news alert, scandal at Mount Sinai. Top surgeon exposes decades of deception. He silenced the notification, turning his focus ahead, to the airport, where his private jet awaited. Dublin wasn't an escape. It was a calculated new beginning. Behind him, Manhattan's medical elite would grapple with the fallout for months to come. None of them would ever forget the wedding that wasn't, or the surgeon who had turned his meticulous precision toward a different kind of cutting. 1 year later, the morning sun glinted off the River Liffey, casting diamond-like patterns against the walls of Dr. Nolan Gibson's penthouse in Dublin's prestigious Docklands district. What had begun as a departure had become a renaissance. Nolan stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, sipping his morning coffee while reviewing patient files on his tablet. Nearby, the Irish Times lay open on the breakfast bar, its headline praising his latest medical breakthrough. Dublin's American surgeon pioneers revolutionary valve replacement technique. His phone buzzed. Another message from St. James's chief of surgery. Board approved your research funding. Full autonomy, as requested. Still celebrating landing Mount C's star surgeon. A satisfied smile played at Nolan's lips as he set the phone down. The betrayals of the past had stripped away his naivety, but in their place, they had left him with something far more valuable: clarity. Every procedure, every innovation, every success was his, untainted by false loyalties or manufactured family ties. A final notification flashed across his screen, an update from New York. Mount Sinai scandal deepens. Former department head faces multiple lawsuits. Nolan took a slow sip of coffee, watching the city stretch out before him. The attached photo showed Enrique Knapp leaving a courthouse, his once immaculate appearance now haggard. The accompanying article detailed the growing number of wealthy patients coming forward with claims of fraudulent vasectomy procedures, each lawsuit adding to the mounting legal fees draining Enrique's accounts. A second alert followed. Medical board hearing, nurse's license under review amid insurance fraud case. The image showed Laurel, her carefully maintained beauty fading under the weight of stress, avoiding the cameras of persistent reporters. Over the past year, her role in Enrique's scheme had come to light piece by piece. She had helped falsify post-operative care records, making it easier for Enrique to fake the procedures. Nolan's private investigator had been meticulous, uncovering how Laurel had used her nursing credentials to facilitate the fraud. With every revelation, another layer of her social standing was stripped away, leaving her increasingly isolated as former friends distanced themselves from the scandal. His intercom buzzed. "Dr. Gibson, your 9 a.m. meeting with the research team is ready." "Thank you, Cleodna." He gathered his materials, pausing briefly to adjust his tie in the reflection of a framed article. Dublin Medical Excellence Award, Dr. Nolan Gibson recognized for innovative cardiac procedures. The past year had changed him, but not in the way his betrayers might have expected. There was no bitterness, no consuming rage, only the same precise, calculated focus that had made him a brilliant surgeon, now applied to every aspect of his life. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, his former family's carefully curated world continued to unravel. Brianna sat in her cramped Manhattan studio apartment, staring at her phone. On the screen was Brandon's wedding announcement, a society page feature on his whirlwind romance with his new fiancée, which had begun shortly after his fortunate escape from a fraudulent engagement. Her attempt to reach out had been met with a cease and desist letter from the Preston family lawyers. The prestigious hospital residency she had once been promised had vanished the moment the full truth emerged. Now, she worked grueling shifts at urgent care clinics, her dreams of following in either father's footsteps shattered. Across town, Julia faced her own reckoning. She stood outside Mount Sinai's medical school, rereading the email for the 100th time. "Dear Miss Gibson, after a review of recent events and in accordance with our morality clause, we regret to inform you that your admission to Mount Sinai School of Medicine has been rescinded." The carefully planned future she had envisioned, following in Nolan's footsteps to surgical excellence, had crumbled. The morality clause in the trust fund meant she couldn't even afford to apply to lesser schools. Her attempt to paint Nolan as controlling had backfired spectacularly when his former patients flooded social media with stories of his compassion and integrity. 20 years of performing life-saving surgeries pro bono for children, one viral post read. "Dr. Gibson gave my daughter a future when no one else would even try, and his own children tried to destroy him with lies. But it was Ryan, the youngest, who faced the harshest awakening." He sat in the Yale bursar's office, struggling to keep his composure as the administrator delivered the final blow. "I'm sorry, Mr. Gibson, but without the next semester's tuition payment, we'll have to withdraw your enrollment." "My father, Enrique Knapp, he promised he'd cover it," Ryan stammered. The administrator's expression remained impassive. "Dr. Knapp's office has informed us he is unable to provide funding due to ongoing legal issues. Perhaps you should contact Dr. Gibson about reinstating your educational trust." But Ryan knew that option came with conditions he wasn't ready to face. The trust's morality clause required a public admission of Ryan's role in the deception and a formal apology. Yet his pride, the same pride that had once fueled his mockery of the man who had raised him, now kept him from taking the path to redemption. That evening, in a modest Queens apartment, Laurel sifted through a growing pile of past due notices while Enrique paced restlessly, his designer shoes scuffing the worn carpet. "The malpractice insurance company's final decision came today," he spat, waving a letter in frustration. "They're refusing to cover anything. Deliberate fraud voids the policy." "You promised me they'd never find out," Laurel hissed, her carefully maintained composure fracturing. "You said the records were perfect. And you swore your nursing records would back up my procedures," Enrique shot back. "Now look at us. I'm about to lose my license, your career is under review, and your precious social status is gone. At least I'm not the one facing criminal charges," Laurel snapped. "How many fake files did you create? 20? 30? You didn't complain when those fake procedures were paying for our children's lifestyles," Enrique retorted. "Or when my academic mentoring payments kept you in designer clothes." Their bitter exchange was interrupted by a call from their lawyer. Enrique listened in silence before hanging up with a grim expression. "More bad news," he announced. 3 more patients just joined the class action lawsuit. Their wives are particularly interested in the fertility clinic records. You know, the ones you helped falsify. Laurel's retort was cut short by a notification on her phone. Another former friend had publicly unfollowed her on social media. Her carefully curated image as part of Manhattan's medical elite had crumbled, replaced by whispers and cold shoulders at every charity event and social gathering she could still access. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Nolan sat in his Dublin office reviewing applications for his department's latest initiative, a medical ethics scholarship focused on integrity and patient care. The irony wasn't lost on him. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed him had now fueled a program designed to shape future generations of medical professionals. His assistant entered with a message. "Dr. Gibson, Mount Sinai's board has sent another offer for you to return as chief of cardiothoracic surgery. Decline it," he responded without hesitation. but send them my latest research paper on ethical guidelines in medical practice. They seem to need it. A final thought. Education is one of the most powerful tools for both personal and societal transformation, serving as the foundation upon which individuals build their futures and contribute to the progress of their communities. Through education, people gain the knowledge, skills, and critical thinking abilities necessary to navigate life's complexities, solve problems, and make informed decisions. In today's rapidly evolving world, the value of education cannot be overstated. It equips individuals with the tools to adapt to changing circumstances, embrace new opportunities, and overcome challenges. From early childhood learning to higher education and lifelong development, the journey of learning is a continuous process that shapes both individual lives and the collective future of societies. At its core, education is about more than just acquiring information. It is about fostering curiosity, creativity, and a lifelong love of learning. It empowers individuals to question the status quo, explore new ideas, and push the boundaries of what is possible. In doing so, education serves as a catalyst for innovation and progress, driving advancements in science, technology, medicine, and the arts. Moreover, education plays a vital role in promoting social equity and inclusion, offering individuals from diverse backgrounds the opportunity to reach their full potential and contribute meaningfully to society. By breaking down barriers and creating pathways for upward mobility, education helps to reduce inequalities and foster a more just and equitable world. Beyond its societal benefits, education profoundly impacts personal growth and development. It shapes an individual's sense of identity, purpose, and self-worth, empowering them to lead fulfilling and meaningful lives. Through education, people develop the confidence and resilience needed to pursue their ambitions, overcome challenges, and navigate life's uncertainties. Additionally, education fosters empathy and understanding, encouraging individuals to appreciate diverse perspectives, cultures, and experiences. This, in turn, promotes tolerance, cooperation, and mutual respect, essential qualities for building inclusive and harmonious communities. In the modern era, technology has become an integral part of education, revolutionizing the way we learn, teach, and interact with information. The advent of digital tools and online platforms has made education more accessible, flexible, and personalized than ever before. With just a click, individuals can access a vast wealth of knowledge and resources from around the world, allowing them to learn at their own pace and on their own terms. Online courses, virtual classrooms, and educational apps have opened up new opportunities for lifelong learning, enabling individuals to acquire new skills and knowledge throughout their lives. Furthermore, technology has transformed teaching methods, providing educators with innovative tools to engage students and enhance learning outcomes. Interactive simulations, virtual reality experiences, data analytics, and artificial intelligence are reshaping the educational landscape, creating new possibilities for both teaching and learning. However, while technology has the potential to greatly enhance education, it also presents challenges that must be addressed. One major concern is the digital divide, which remains a significant barrier to access. Many individuals and communities lack the necessary infrastructure and resources to fully benefit from digital learning opportunities. Additionally, the rapid pace of technological change demands that both educators and learners continuously adapt and update their skills, a process that can be both exciting and daunting. As we navigate the complexities of the digital age, it is crucial to ensure that technology is leveraged in a way that promotes equity, inclusivity, and ethical considerations. Achieving this requires a collaborative effort among educators, policymakers, and technology developers to create solutions that are accessible, affordable, and aligned with the needs of diverse learners. Beyond technological advancements, the future of education will be shaped by broader societal trends and challenges. Climate change, for instance, is an urgent global issue that requires innovative solutions and collective action. Education plays a crucial role in raising awareness about environmental concerns, fostering sustainable practices, and equipping individuals with the knowledge and skills needed to address climate-related challenges. Similarly, the increasing importance of global citizenship and intercultural understanding highlights the need for education systems to promote global awareness, empathy, and collaboration. In an increasingly interconnected world, individuals must develop the ability to work across cultural, linguistic, and geographical boundaries to tackle shared challenges and build a peaceful, sustainable future. Another key trend shaping the future of education is the shift toward lifelong learning and continuous skills development. In today's rapidly evolving job market, where new industries and professions constantly emerge. Individuals must be prepared to update their skills and adapt to new roles. This requires a shift in mindset, from viewing education as a one-time event to embracing it as an ongoing journey. Lifelong learning opportunities, such as online courses, professional development programs, and informal learning experiences, will be essential in helping individuals stay relevant and thrive in an ever-changing world. Staying relevant and competitive in the workforce will increasingly depend on skills such as critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and emotional intelligence, qualities that are expected to hold the highest value in the future. As we move forward, it is evident that education will remain a cornerstone of both personal and societal development. However, to meet the evolving demands and challenges of the 21st century, our approach to education must adapt. This requires a holistic and inclusive framework that prioritizes equity, accessibility, and innovation. It also demands a commitment to fostering a culture of lifelong learning, where individuals are empowered to take control of their educational journeys, pursue their passions, and explore their interests. Ultimately, education is not solely about workforce preparation. It is about enabling individuals to lead meaningful and fulfilling lives, contribute to their communities, and make a lasting, positive impact on the world. By investing in education and embracing the opportunities and challenges ahead, we can build a brighter and more equitable future for all. Back to Nolan. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting hues of amber and gold across the Liffey. Nolan gazed at his reflection in the window, seeing not a man broken by betrayal, but one who had transformed deception into determination and treachery into triumph. Tomorrow would bring new surgeries, fresh innovations, and renewed opportunities to save lives. The past was exactly where it belonged, behind him, serving as the foundation for something far greater than the illusion of family, a legacy built on truth. Meanwhile, Enrique Knapp sat in his attorney's office, his eyes scanning the towering stack of legal documents before him. More patients had come forward, each lawsuit more damning than the last. Wealthy businessmen, whose wives had mysteriously conceived years after their supposed vasectomies, were particularly eager to testify. It's not just the malpractice, his lawyer said grimly. The insurance fraud charges alone could lead to severe penalties. And with Mrs. Gibson's nursing license under review for falsifying records. Don't mention that woman to me, Enrique snapped, his frustration mounting. The affair that had once felt exhilarating, worth every risk, had now become a noose tightening around his neck. This is her fault. If she had been more careful with the documentation, I'd be careful about pointing fingers, his lawyer interrupted. Prosecutors are very interested in how long she helped cover up your fraudulent procedures. They're offering her a deal to testify. Across the city, Laurel sat before the nursing board, her meticulously chosen designer outfit failing to mask the reality of her unraveling reputation. Mrs. Gibson, the board chairman addressed her. Or do you prefer Miss Knapp now? Gibson is fine, she replied tightly, the words bitter on her tongue. Her divorce from Nolan had been finalized with ruthless efficiency, while Enrique's promises of marriage had disappeared along with his finances. The evidence shows a pattern of falsified post-operative records spanning over 15 years, the chairman continued. Each fraudulent vasectomy required supporting nursing documentation you provided. Enrique assured me. Dr. Knapp's assurances are not the issue here, another board member cut in. Your professional integrity is. These men's wives placed their trust in medical professionals to tell them the truth. Instead, you played a role in a deception that not only impacted their healthcare decisions, but also the very foundation of their families. The irony of Laurel's role in destroying families was not lost on the nursing board. Their decision was unanimous. Her nursing license was revoked. Meanwhile, the children she had raised to value appearances over integrity faced their own reckonings. Brianna's attempts to rebuild her medical career met yet another roadblock when a potential employer reviewed her references. I'm sorry, Miss Gibson, the HR director said, but we can't risk our clinic's reputation. Your involvement in the Mount Si scandal is too well documented. I was just a child when it started. Brianna protested. I didn't understand. You were 26 when you planned to have both men walk you down the aisle, the director reminded her. And your social media posts mocking Dr. Gibson's ignorance of your paternity suggest you understood perfectly well. Julia's attempt at salvaging her reputation through social media had backfired spectacularly. Her accusations of Nolan being controlling and emotionally abusive had triggered an outpouring of support for him. Former patients shared stories of his compassion, nurses and residents praised his mentorship, and charitable organizations revealed decades of pro bono work he had never publicized. Each testimony painted the picture of a man who had selflessly given to a family that had ridiculed his generosity behind his back. The youngest, Ree, faced perhaps the harshest lesson. Sitting in a coffee shop, he watched Enrique walk past him without acknowledgement. "But you said you'd help," Ree had pleaded earlier that day. "You're my father. I'm being sued by half of Manhattan's elite," Enrique snapped. "My assets are frozen, my career is over, and your mother's demands are endless. I can't afford another mouth to feed." The casual dismissal stung more than Nolan's deliberate departure. At least Nolan had left them a path to redemption through the educational trusts. Enrique offered nothing but excuses. That evening, in their modest Queens apartment, the great love affair that had destroyed so many lives ended not in passion, but in pettiness. "Your son came begging for money today," Enrique told Laurel. "Our son," she corrected. "No, yours," he replied coldly. "I'm done pretending. Look where it got us. I had a reputation, a career, respect. Now, a one-bedroom apartment, and a woman who can't even nurse anymore. At least I'm not facing jail time," Laurel shot back. How many years do they give for medical fraud these days? Their argument was abruptly interrupted by a news alert. Dublin medical innovation makes headlines. Dr. N.L. Gibson's revolutionary procedure saves child's life. The silence that followed was overwhelming. 5 years later, at Boston's prestigious medical innovation conference, the air buzzed with anticipation. Dr. Nolan Gibson's keynote address on his groundbreaking valve replacement procedure had drawn professionals from around the world. Afterward, in a hospital corridor, he encountered a familiar face. Ree, older and humbled, now wore orderly scrubs as he pushed a supply cart. "Dr. Gibson," Ree's voice was hesitant. I'm working here while taking community college classes." Nolan studied the young man who had once been his youngest child. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something resembling understanding. "The trust is still active," Nolan said simply. "When you're ready to earn it honestly." "I know," Ree replied. "That's actually why I'm here. Working as an orderly, seeing what real medical professionals do, how they care for patients. I understand now what you tried to teach us about integrity." Knox's response was measured. "Understanding is the first step. Actions determine the rest." Their brief conversation was interrupted by a nurse calling for Ree's assistance. As Nolan watched his former son push the supply cart away, he reflected on the changes the past 5 years had brought. In a small Queens apartment, Laurel and Enrique's once passionate love affair had deteriorated into endless blame and resentment. Their attempts to rebuild their careers had failed. No hospital was willing to risk hiring professionals with their history of fraud. "This is your fault" had become their daily refrain. "You promised we wouldn't get caught." Meanwhile, Nolan had only continued to rise. His Dublin practice had revolutionized cardiac care. His research papers were now required reading in medical schools, and his latest initiative, the Gibson Medical Ethics Scholarship, was shaping a new generation of doctors who understood that integrity wasn't just a virtue, but the very foundation of medicine. "The scholarship interview panel is ready," his assistant reminded him as he returned to the conference. The candidates were promising medical students who had demonstrated not just academic excellence, but ethical integrity in difficult situations. Each interview involved a case study on medical fraud and its consequences. Some candidates recognized the case as his own story, though he never confirmed it. The lesson was what mattered. Integrity, once broken, carried a price no amount of deception could escape. That evening, as he prepared for dinner with Dr. Serena Collins, a fellow surgeon whose honesty had caught his attention, Nolan received one final email. It was from Ree, sent hours after their hallway encounter. "Dear Dr. Gibson, today reminded me of something you once said in the ER. Every heart has a rhythm of truth. Our job is to listen for it. I didn't understand then. I do now. Ree." Nolan smiled slightly as he closed his laptop. The betrayal that had once shattered his life had, in the end, paved the way for something far greater, a life built on truth, innovation, and a legacy that would outlast any deception. His greatest revenge was not in destroying those who had wronged him, but in creating something far more valuable from the ruins of their deceit. 10 years later, the Manhattan courthouse loomed against the autumn sky as Enrique Knapp shuffled through its doors, a shadow of his former self. At 64, his once magnetic charm had faded to gray, his proud posture bowed under the weight of a decade's consequences. Today marked the final hearing in a class action lawsuit that had taken 10 years to resolve. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Martinez entered the courtroom. Enrique's public defender, now all he could afford, straightened his wrinkled tie. Behind them, the gallery was filled with familiar faces, former patients whose lives had been upended by his deception, their families seeking closure, and reporters eager to document the downfall of Mount C's once renowned doctor. In the matter of Collins et al. Versus Knapp, Judge Martinez began, this court has reviewed the settlement terms. The defendant's remaining assets will be distributed among the victims of his medical fraud scheme. Mr. Knapp, do you understand these terms? Yes, Your Honor, Enrique's voice cracked. The settlement would take everything, his savings, his pension, even the small Queens apartment he once shared with Laurel. He had managed to hold on to the apartment until now. In the back row of the gallery, Laurel Gibson Knapp, who had never legally changed her name despite Enrique's years of empty promises, watched the proceedings with bitter resignation. At 58, the financial strain had eroded the polished image she once maintained. The designer outfits were long gone, replaced by discount store purchases. Her once pristine blonde hair, now streaked with gray, hadn't seen a professional stylist in years. Furthermore, the judge continued, the defendant is permanently barred from any medical practice or consultation, including overseas opportunities. That final stipulation crushed Enrique's last hope. He had been negotiating with a dubious clinic in South America, offering them his special services. Now, even that escape was gone. After the hearing, Laurel didn't wait for him. Their grand love affair had deteriorated into a bitter, resentful coexistence in their cramped apartment, each blaming the other for their downfall. That night, she returned to her job as a receptionist at a strip mall dental office, the only medical-adjacent work she could find after losing her nursing license. The next morning, the Irish Times told a vastly different story. Gibson Medical Ethics Foundation expands global reach. The accompanying photo featured Dr. Nolan Gibson, now a distinguished 62, addressing Trinity College Dublin's medical school. The article highlighted his latest triumph, a worldwide initiative combining cutting-edge cardiac procedures with stringent ethical oversight. His valve replacement technique had become the global standard, while the Gibson Medical Ethics Scholarship had nurtured a new generation of doctors committed to integrity over profit. In his penthouse office overlooking the River Liffey, Nolan reviewed the foundation's latest reports with his wife, Dr. Serena Collins Gibson. Their marriage, built on shared values and mutual respect, had flourished over the past 7 years. Serena now led the foundation's research division, her dedication to medical ethics aligning seamlessly with his own. The New York Times wants an interview about the foundation's 10th anniversary, Serena said, sliding a tablet across his desk. They're particularly interested in how it all began. Nolan smiled. They already know. That wedding scandal is still required reading in medical ethics courses. Speaking of which, Serena added, pulling up another email, Ree's application for the scholarship program came in this morning. Ree Gibson, now 29, had spent the past decade working his way up from hospital orderly to licensed practical nurse. His transformation, from entitled youth to dedicated healthcare professional, had been slow but genuine. Each step was earned through honest work, his former arrogance replaced by a true commitment to patient care. His supervisor at Boston General wrote, quite the recommendation, Serena noted. Apparently, he even uses his own story to teach new staff about medical ethics. Meanwhile, in a modest Manhattan apartment, Brianna Gibson Preston was no longer. After her society wedding imploded, she eventually married a pharmacy technician and settled in Queens. The scandal had permanently derailed her surgical ambitions, limiting her career to that of a physician's assistant, the highest position she could achieve in medicine. Her attempts to mend ties with the Prestons had failed spectacularly. Brandon had married within months of their broken engagement, his new wife now sitting on the very hospital boards Brianna once expected to chair. The society pages that had once celebrated her as Manhattan's medical princess now barely acknowledged her existence. Julia, now 33, had taken an unexpected path after losing her spot in medical school. She found work as a medical equipment sales representative, traveling between small clinics, the only facilities still willing to do business with a Gibson. Her once scorching social media presence, filled with mocking posts about Nolan, had gone silent. Now, every post was carefully professional, though the internet never truly forgets. Her failed attempt at character assassination had long since backfired. That morning, across different corners of New York, the former Gibsons received the same email. The Gibson Medical Ethics Foundation proudly announces its 10th anniversary symposium. Keynote speaker, Dr. Nolan Gibson. Topic: Integrity in Medicine, a Decade of Change. Location: Mount Sinai Hospital, Main Auditorium. The choice of venue was no coincidence. Mount Sinai, desperate to rebuild its reputation after the Knapp scandal, had spent years attempting to court Nolan's return. Instead, he had chosen to use their auditorium for a single day, a stark reminder of how integrity could triumph over deception. Reading the announcement on a public library computer, Enrique felt the last shreds of his dignity unravel. The symposium would feature case studies of medical fraud, including his own. His name would forever be a cautionary tale, taught to future generations as an example of ethics abandoned for profit. Laurel saw the announcement at work, her hands trembling as she filed dental records. Her receptionist salary barely covered her share of the rent, forcing her to take on extra work cleaning medical offices at night. The irony wasn't lost on her, scrubbing spaces where she had once administered care. That evening, in their shabby Queens apartment, Enrique and Laurel sat down to another microwave dinner, their conversation as bitter as their instant coffee. Mount Sinai is hosting his symposium, Enrique spat. Those hypocrites. Half their board knew about my special arrangements. At least you're not scrubbing toilets in medical offices, Laurel shot back. Do you know how many former friends I've run into while cleaning? Women who used to beg me for invitations to my charity events? Their argument was cut short by the sound of paper slipping under their door. Final eviction notice. Enrique's settlement payments had drained them. Their once glamorous love affair, built on deception and sustained by fraud, had led them here, to a roach-infested apartment they could no longer afford. Across the Atlantic, in a penthouse overlooking the River Liffey, Nolan and Serena hosted a dinner party. Their guests included leading medical ethicists, researchers, and 2 former Gibson medical ethics scholars who had exposed major insurance fraud schemes in their hospitals. Your foundation changed the culture, one guest observed. 10 years ago, doctors looked the other way. Now they speak up. Integrity isn't just about following rules, Nolan replied, exchanging a knowing glance with Serena. It's about understanding why the rules exist. Every medical decision affects lives beyond the patient in front of us. Later that night, as he reviewed Ree's scholarship application, Nolan read his personal statement. I learned about medical ethics the hard way, by watching my biological father destroy lives through fraud and my real father build something better from the wreckage. Every time I help a patient, I remember that trust is earned through truth, not convenience. Serena, reading over his shoulder, squeezed his hand. Are you ready to tell your story at the symposium? It's not just my story anymore, Nolan answered. It's become something bigger, a lesson about choices and consequences, about turning betrayal into something meaningful. The symposium proved his point. The Mount Sinai auditorium was packed with medical professionals, students, and ethics committees from around the world. In the front row, Ree sat in his nurse's scrubs, representing both what had been lost and what could be rebuilt through honest work. Enrique and Laurel were not in attendance. Though they had received invitations, they spent that day packing their few remaining belongings, preparing to part ways at last. Enrique had secured a room in a retirement home for destitute medical professionals. An institution he had once mocked would now be Enrique's final refuge. Laurel, meanwhile, would move in with a former nurse whose career she had ruined by falsifying records, now working as her elderly mother's caregiver in exchange for a small room. Their once passionate love affair ended not with fire, but with paperwork, change of address forms, divided bills, and separate lives reduced to separate boxes. The deception that once seemed thrilling, worth every risk, had bought them nothing but a slow, inevitable decline. In the Mount Sinai auditorium, Nolan's keynote address came to a close. Medicine rests on trust, between doctor and patient, between colleagues, between institutions and the public they serve. When that trust is broken for personal gain, it doesn't just harm individuals, it weakens the very foundation of medical care. 10 years ago, a betrayal taught me that lesson, but it also taught me something else. From the ashes of deception, we can build something stronger. Every scholar this foundation has supported, every ethical violation they have exposed, every patient they have protected, these are the true legacy of that moment. Integrity, once broken, carries a price that no deception can erase. But integrity upheld, restored, and championed builds a legacy that outlasts any fleeting personal gain. The standing ovation reached even the hospital's lower floors, where Ree had once pushed a supply cart as an orderly. In the audience, young medical students, who had studied the Knapp case as a cautionary tale, saw its real-world consequences. The surgeon who had turned betrayal into something greater, and the son who had chosen truth over illusion. That evening, as Dublin's lights shimmered over the River Liffey, Nolan and Serena reviewed applications for the Foundation's next scholarship class. Among them were students who had reported ethical violations at their schools, researchers who had refused to falsify data despite pressure, and healthcare workers who had chosen integrity over personal advancement. And in a small box, delivered to their office, lay a contribution to the Foundation's growing ethics archive. Enrique's medical license, surrendered after a decade of legal battles. Attached was a note. For your ethics museum. Let them learn from my mistakes. Enrique Knapp, MD, revoked. The license would join other artifacts: Laurel's revoked nursing certificate, newspaper clippings from the scandal, and the wedding invitation that had never led to a ceremony. Together, they told a story, not just of betrayal, but of its cost, and the unexpected ways in which truth could triumph over deception. In the end, what had once been the perfect betrayal had created something its perpetrators had never intended: a lasting legacy of integrity that would shape medical ethics for generations to come. While Enrique and Laurel's deception had bought them a decade of ruin, Nolan's commitment to truth had built a foundation for the future. And in hospitals around the world, doctors trained in the Gibson tradition would remember every medical decision, every ethical choice, carried consequences far beyond the moment of action. In this way, a personal betrayal had become a professional revolution, proving that the greatest revenge was not destruction, but creation. Turning pain into purpose, Nolan had ensured that the story of the wedding that never was would be remembered not for its scandal, but for its lesson. Integrity, once chosen and upheld, could transform even the deepest betrayal into lasting change, one ethical decision at a time. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.